Hi, welcome to Attainable Green. I'm Jess, and today we're going to be talking about things I love about the orchid and plant community. Things are slowly getting back to normal, and we're opening up and having in-person meetings. That means Orchid Society meetings and local houseplant swaps are starting to pick up again. Because of this, I am attending a couple of outdoor events in order to get to know people and to better understand the orchid and plant community. Making friends is hard as you get older, and meeting new people can be a challenge if you never step out of your comfort zone, if you never step out of your normal routine. And so for me, doing this is a step outside of what I usually do. So I'm going to share a couple of things that I have found to be really positive and beneficial by joining a local plant community or orchid society. The first one is being welcoming and kind to newcomers. It may come to no surprise to many of you who are part of orchid societies already or are part of local plant swaps or any other group offline. I think for the past year, I've been spending a lot of time online on social media and in groups and trying to connect with people virtually. But when it comes to face-to-face contact, I think that just elevates the experience that much more. I find that the local plant swaps are very welcoming and just a very friendly and accepting environment. They understand that there are people of all different hobbyist growing levels, from beginners to their very first plant to people who have been growing for years and have these lush specimen plants that they can provide beautiful divisions and cuttings for. And in this space, they're just really happy to talk about plants and to just share their passion. And that's one of the things I just really love, is that people just share their passions and are willing to just be very open about things. There's no snobbery here. There's a lot of humility and a lot of grace for people who don't know certain terms or scientific names. I've noticed that there are a lot of people who are getting into houseplants and orchids, and I am one of those people because although I've been growing orchids for quite some time, the houseplant segment has been kind of new to me. So I have no idea what a lot of things mean, and recently I just learned what chonk means when they are talking about cuttings and unrooted cuttings and all sorts of things. So for me, that's always a learning experience. And the fact that there are people who are just willing to take their time to help you out, to help facilitate trades or translate or just kind of go the extra mile really makes a difference to me being a newcomer in this space. I recently started going to my local Orchid Society meetings, and it is a different space than I completely expected because I actually didn't know what to expect. In fact, there are a lot of growers there who are just so knowledgeable and have such envious collections that I can't even begin to start figuring out how to pick their brain so that I can get all the knowledge that they have acquired over the years. And just seeing all their beautiful plants has been such a boon. I think even going to one meeting, I have learned so much more than I could ever have gained on my own. So I am just really excited about that, and hopefully I can continue going to these meetings so that I can benefit from them and be in a place where I am a student instead of being a teacher. This is really important to me because on this channel, I'd like to share my experiences growing plants and to show that orchids and houseplants in general are not very intimidating. A lot of people tend to have these myths that orchids are fragile, they require a lot of high maintenance setups, or they're just very involved. But in fact, they can be as low maintenance as you want them to be. And there's an orchid that can fit any lifestyle or almost any climate. So that is just part of the mission that I have here on this channel. And by continuing to learn and grow through these offline setups and meetings, I think I just gained that much more of an appreciation for people who are just warm and friendly and just willing to share their knowledge. Now, the second part of this community that I love so much is just meeting and connecting with such a diverse group of people. There are people from all walks of life, all ages, all ethnicities, and it's just such a mind-blowing experience. So to me, it makes the global world feel a lot smaller. It's interesting because we have plants from all around the world in our homes, and when we go to these events, we kind of meet people from all around the world, and they've kind of become our friends from all around the world. To me, that is a huge asset because you're meeting so many people from all walks of life, and you learn so much more from their experiences. And you just learn that the world is a lot smaller and a lot more similar than you think. That's the beautiful thing about plants, is that it brings all sorts of people together, and when they kind of collide and meet and gather, that's kind of when you get this really interesting mix of cultures, of experiences, and just personalities. The people really make the community, and when they're all friendly and willing to share and even being vulnerable about their lives, that's what really brings people and bonds them together. I know some of these people that I've met at these houseplant swaps, they became fast friends from just continually swapping their favorite plants to each other. And I think that's just really, awesome that people are just building stronger relationships and friendships over time, and their passion together is plants. Not only that, I am kind of surprised that there are people who are willing to be very open and very vulnerable about certain aspects of their lives, and to really just see people coming together and bond and just support one another has been just a very positive experience. I've seen it on some of these message boards and Facebook groups where people are having a difficult time and they feel like they need to sell their collection in order to support themselves. And instead of people vying for their prized plant collection, they've actually come together to fundraise for them so that they could keep their plant collection and still have the funds to get through whatever they need to get through. And to me, that is really the value of community, because when times get tough and things get hard, you really need like those people to rely on, and you need those people to come together to draw near to you. And I think that's not as common as it once was, where a community can come together to support one another. And just to see that in action and to see it in real time is just very, very heartwarming and uplifting. I think just because of the news and being so isolated this past year, I think I've been impacted by a lot of this negative news and negative press. And I think just seeing the generosity and the openness and the kindness that people are treating each other, that it just is really special. I'm not sure if all groups are like this, but to me, in just that short amount of time that I've been able to be a part of these communities offline, I have just seen a lot of heart. When we all gather together, we kind of realize like we're all humans and we all have personalities and emotions, and we don't always do the perfect thing or the right thing all the time. And that's okay, but we have a core passion together, which is taking care of plants. And so that is just kind of the uniting factor of all of this, but that allows for so much diversity and so many things at play. And it just creates such a nice space for people that I can definitely see why people say that they love plants more than they love people. But when you love people as much as you love the plants, then it just makes this whole space more, that much more enjoyable. Now, the third thing I've learned is that nurseries and sellers are people too. Now, that is no surprise because obviously there are people working behind these companies that we buy our plants from. Oftentimes, we think of them as these large, mass-produced factories that are kind of cold and nameless and in some ways a little heartless. And the truth is, it's completely false. I mean, there are people behind all of these companies, and especially with smaller sellers, I think they are people too. And we kind of forget about that fact when we are buying these plants online, and we just see it as a very transactional experience. Being a part of these Orchid Society meetings or these houseplant swaps put a face to the names of all of these people. And that has been such a boon because not only do you get to see the beautiful plants that they grow, but also the people behind it. And getting to know those people, I think, is really important because you can see their passion and their dedication to growing beautiful plants. Now, of course, they are humans, so they make mistakes, things get messed up or wrong during shipping, and sometimes plants don't turn out the way that you expected. But I think we should give a little bit of grace to all of these companies and people because after all, they are human and they do make mistakes and things do happen with plants because they are just live things. I've been following the orchid industry for quite some time. Almost every single year, I've noticed that there are nurseries that are closing down, retiring, breeders that are ending their programs and selling off their mother plants, their specimen collections, and just closing up shop. But I haven't necessarily seen as many younger stores and shops opening up to take up the mantle in that space. So to me, I find that the orchid industry in particular has become a lot smaller. and it's been kind of sad. Conversely, in the houseplant market, it's kind of the opposite. There's tons of sellers that are just starting out and they're growing all these plants, and it's just kind of seen a huge boon over the past year. I don't know how those two intersect, but I would love to see more people get into orchids and houseplants and just kind of cross-pollinate. That's one of the reasons why I've been getting into flasking orchid seeds and getting into how to do that, and probably into some tissue culture as well, because I find that in industry there are industry trade secrets, of course, so people can't share their information as readily, and they're not as willing to share as readily because there's a competitive market advantage or effort involved. So if they're able to do something that nobody else can do, then they kind of have a higher value for their plants. So I'm trying to learn as I go, and some of these Facebook groups have been really beneficial and knowledgeable and just willing to help me troubleshoot what I'm doing wrong. And so those are one of the reasons why I do nursery tours on my channel, is because I want to get to know the nursery itself, like all the plants they have and all the beautiful things that they show. But hopefully one day I'll be able to meet the owners and get to sit down with them and share a little bit more about their passions and the face behind those companies that you see such beautiful plants from. So moving on, another thing that I really love about the plant community is that you just never stop learning. There's always so many things to learn and so much to grow from that I feel like the more you dive deeper into something, the more you figure that there's so much more there is still to know. And I think nobody knows everything there is to know about a plant, a genus, or even a growing method. There's always something new to try, something new to experiment, and even if you've been growing the same plant for 20 years, there is always something new that you can discover about your plants. Plants in general tend to be kind of weird, and they can do weird things, so that is always something to keep you on your toes. And especially with orchids, sometimes you do everything right, and from one year to the next it can be completely different. That requires a lot of troubleshooting and problem solving. In the plant community, I always think it's great when people post their problems or post something that they're working on, and people are just willing to share the results or willing to share suggestions and methods. Granted, in some cases you may get conflicting advice because nobody knows your specific growing conditions, but I think that there are just people who are willing to share their tips, and their knowledge has been fantastic. For example, during one of these plant swaps, there was a person who was willing to help me pick out a healthy plant. I was looking inside a greenhouse and I wanted to kind of learn a little bit more about alocasias or calicaceas, and I had no idea how to even begin to look for something. And she was really kind, and she just basically told me, you know, most people tend to look at the tops of the leaves to see how healthy that is. And while that's great, that doesn't tell the whole story. So what you really have to do is kind of look under the leaves towards the stalk or the main stem of the plant, and then you can check for how thick and rigid that stem is, and then also check for new growth or new leaves so that you know you're going to have a healthy plant before bringing it home. And I thought that was great advice. It seemed very simple and basic, but for a newcomer like me in that space, that was very valuable. So I think just learning how to be open and aware of that is such a great thing. And sometimes I'm a teacher in those spaces because I come to the houseplant swaps with my orchids, and they come with their houseplants, and they're like, what are orchids and how do I take care of them? So being able to not only share my knowledge, but to also learn and gain some feedback as well has been great. I think it just keeps your mind sharp, that you're always working and tinkering and thinking, and so you're never like languishing. I think sometimes certain jobs are more routine or rote or tedious, that we just kind of turn our brains off, and then we just feel very unmotivated, or we can feel that kind of lack of challenge. And when you're taking care of plants, you get to kind of turn on that side of your brain and use it as a muscle. And the more you use it, the stronger it gets, and you get better at observing things and adapting and just growing better plants. I think the best growers are also the best observationalists. They just see things and they just automatically know because they've been watching it for so long. They know all of the different ways in which a fungus can present itself, or an infection can present itself, or all sorts of things. And that takes time to see. Like, no matter how many photographs you may look at, nothing really replaces that real world experience. And the last thing I love about the plant community is just all of the enthusiasm. I think enthusiasm is infectious, and just seeing and hearing so many people that are just so excited about plants, it just kind of renews that interest. I think sometimes people get kind of lost in their collections where they've had it for a long time, had the same plants for a long time. It gets a little bit boring or, you know, a little bit stagnant. But in this space, it's very dynamic, especially in the plant swaps. There's just so many people every time, different people every time, different plants every time. There's always so much to learn. And to me, that's really exciting, just to see all the people who are just so excited about plants. Either they're getting into them or they've been there for a long time. Like, there's always that curiosity and that discovery and that light bulb moment. And I just love seeing that in people. Like, when they just finally get it, that is just the best. And I think because people are just willing and open to share, it allows for you to think a little bit more deeply away from just plants. Like, because of people's love for plants, I think we're able to have a deeper conversation about climate change, about conservation, about sustainability, about all these sorts of things that are these big picture items that we tend to neglect or we tend to put aside because they could be controversial. But because we're talking about plants and your love of plants and your love of nature, those points become not an abrasive, but a place where you can embrace that. And so I've seen a lot of people mention sustainability a lot. That's been coming up a lot in these circles where people are trying to find better ways of potting, better potting soils, even just ways in which you can reduce runoff of fertilizer. So those are things I think a lot of newcomers may not think about, and even some of people who have been growing for a while don't even consider. But I think the younger generation, or just new people in general from different parts of the world and different industries, by mixing them together, they just bring up all sorts of really cool ideas, and I'm just excited and motivated by that. And that's something I'd love to share too on this channel, is that there is a segment of sustainability and conservation in all of this houseplant craziness. Now, owning a houseplant can be something that is beautiful, and it makes your space that much better, and it can be beneficial to your mental health and like all sorts of, you know, really cool things. But it also does tie into the world at large and the world at play. And I think we all have that incentive to be a part of sustainability, be a part of all these initiatives of conservation, and volunteer for these programs to learn about native plants, to learn about how to grow things, how to protect from invasive species, and all of these things that seem to be boring, but the more you dive into it, the more fascinating it becomes. And I just can't wait to learn more about that. So those are a couple of things that I have found that I love about the plant community and the orchid community in general. And if you had those experiences or you have something completely different, please share them in the comments, because I'd love to know how you're experiencing growing houseplants, and if you've met like-minded people or whatnot. I'd just love to know what you think. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And subscribe to my channel, Attainable Green, to follow along on my orchid growing journey. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!